There comes a time in everyone's life where they come across a band or musical artist that feels like it's got a sound that uniquely belongs to them. Not the kind that they were introduced to by their parents that they grew up with, but one that they discovered for themselves. Maybe they first heard it in a movie they liked, or were recommended it by a friend. Maybe they stumbled upon it on the radio, or these days, rather, their recommendation algorithm. Ugh. Perhaps they found some people talking about it on an online message board or something. Whatever the case may be, it became your sound. Maybe no one else you know or showed it to really got it, but that's not what was important. It felt like it belonged to you. And every new song that was made or every older one that you discovered felt like it was made for you. For me, that band is the Protomen. The Protomen is an independent rock band based out of Nashville, Tennessee that has been around since the early 2000s. The main thing they're known for is creating synth rock operas in which they tell a story based on the classic Mega Man series of video games, with 3 original albums in total, with Act 3 having been released very recently, as well as a couple of other side projects and cover albums over the years. They've had a number of band members over the years, both current and former, all performing under aliases who have injected so much personality into the music that they're making, alongside the numerous producers, writers, musicians, and artists that they've collaborated with. However, I think it's fair to say that the main subject of the band and their work isn't really about the individual band members themselves, but instead about the fictional stories that they are committed to telling. The band's music isn't really about their own personal experiences or who they are as people, but that doesn't stop it from sounding uniquely like them. There's a distinct energy and personality that shines through all of their work and is on full display at any live performance they have. They also just have a great sense of humor and have a neat way of connecting to their incredibly passionate audience on occasion.
I stand alone.
You're still their hero!
Hero?
You're still our hero!
See? Don't step on my line, bitch. Then they are fools. See, I deliver it much better than you do, okay? I am a fucking professional.
This cannot be the only way!
I also feel like mentioning that while I said that the main subject of their stories is based on Mega Man, I wouldn't call them a video game band. They've been related to the subject obviously, have been recognized by Capcom, and have made numerous appearances at events like MagFest, which is where I first managed to see them play live in 2024. But I guess I want to make the distinction that the music that they make is truly their own. They're not the kind of band that just makes electric guitar covers of the 8-bit music and slaps lyrics onto them. While the story is based on Mega Man, over time it takes on a life of its own, with characters and themes that they explore that have little to nothing to do with the games themselves. You could know nothing about Mega Man or even that that's what their albums are about and still enjoy it all the same. Hence why I had no idea that that's what they were even based on for quite a while before listening to their original albums from start to finish. I first came across them in 2018, when I also stumbled upon my favorite YouTube video on the platform in which their music was prominently featured. Since then, they've gradually become my favorite band and one that I have been ecstatic towards on the rare instance of a new release or even just the occasional update, as well as marveling at all of the incredible artwork that they've had attributed to their albums over time. A lot of the band's inspirations are pretty clear to see, not just in terms of music, but also when it comes to the works of fictions that influence the narratives they create. A lot of Queen and Terminator to list some obvious ones. I don't know if I really need to explain Mega Man as a series very deeply before talking about the albums properly, but I'll just mention that historically I haven't been the hugest Mega Man fan, though lately that is starting to change. Until very recently, I just hadn't really gotten around to playing them myself, and on the rare instance that I did, I was pretty bad at them. But even at this point, I still wouldn't say I'm well versed in the franchise. But I will say that the backstory to the series is something that I have found pretty interesting ever since I first caught wind of it, which surprisingly was before I had even listened to the Protomen actually. There was a really old game theory video where the backstory of Dr. Light and Protomen was briefly talked about, and I just thought that all sounded really cool. Somebody should get around to making a bleak rock opera about it.
And I will finish what was started before
The first album establishes the unnamed city as a dystopian society where humanity is under subjugation by Dr. Wily and his army of robots. Dr. Light, wishing to save the people, creates Protoman to fight against Wily's robots, and in doing so falls in combat, becoming a martyr to the people of the city who cower in fear without the will to continue his fight. In Light's grief for his son, he creates another, Mega Man, and shelters him from the outside world. Mega Man, seeking the truth of the world he's never fully experienced, leaves his home and fights in the name of his fallen brother until he confronts him in person, as Proto, thought to have been dead, has in reality turned code and is working for Wily, resenting humanity for cowering behind heroes instead of learning to stand and fight for themselves. The two fight, and Mega Man is pressed by the people rallying behind him to kill the brother he never had the chance to know, and in doing so kills the person he was ultimately fighting for and came to avenge. And as Wily prepares to deliver the final blow against those that oppose him, Mega Man walks away and abandons humanity, doing nothing to stop the robots from decimating the crowd that wanted to witness the robotic violence. When you consider the source material of the original Mega Man games as an interpretation of a little geeky cartoon game that was nearly 20 years old at the time, the first Protomen album comes off as a sappy, edgy, angry, and the most overly dramatic and self-serious adaptation possible, and it's fucking awesome. This is the kind of edgelord fanfiction I can really get behind. It's the kind of vision based on a video game cartoon character that could only have existed in 2003. Part of what I love about the first album is the fact that it feels like everything that makes the Protomen unique and memorable to me are all there even in their first outing. The overall tone, world building, and establishment of characters, as well as the richer themes about heroism and its deconstruction. The album has a decent amount of variety too, with a lot of the songs carrying a unique identity and sometimes dipping into different genres entirely. I love how grimy this first album sounds. It has that kind of unclean feeling about it that just makes it feel so authentic and punk rock. It definitely feels like a first album made by a bunch of rebellious college students that are diverging from what they're told is the right way to do things. Much like every album of the Protomen, whether or not you're following the minutiae of the plot and its individual characters, you can still feel the raw emotion in each song. The first album in particular is about the thin line that exists between being a hero and a martyr, and the consequences of being a part of a collective lacking an individual will or expression. The idea of someone being hailed as a savior fighting for a people who refuse to fight for themselves and being imagined as the one solely responsible for solving everyone's problems is an interesting way to view the concept. Same goes for considering how one may be perceived after they inevitably buckle under the weight of those expectations, when their simple perspective clashes with the complexities of reality. If there is a takeaway from this first album, it's that what matters most is to always remember that you have some sort of effect on the world around you, whether it be positive or negative. People who are quick to believe that they are doomed will be, as they see no probable future where they save themselves. Placing your future entirely in any one person means that it's up to them to decide what happens to you, whether it be good or bad. If it wasn't clear before, this is not how the story of Mega Man goes. So obviously it doesn't feel like a retelling of any canonical plotline. A lot of people take to calling it an alternate universe. Whatever it is, it feels fleshed out and is arguably its own well-told and complete story. I think were Act 1 to stand by itself with no follow-up, I wouldn't see myself as disappointed at all. But of course, we're not even halfway there yet.
There are no heroes left in man. So it begins. I will not be the father of death.
Act 2 is an interesting case where on the one hand, the album feels so different and experimental, yet at the same time is just a further evolution of what the band had already established for themselves. The variety of songs is greater and the story is even deeper, with a more busy plot and new characters that still feel fully fleshed out, as well as equally rich themes, all while still wearing its influences on its sleeve. If it wasn't clear what I meant before when I said that this band doesn't exactly feel like a video game band, then the album where Robert Oppenheimer meets 1984 is a good example of what I'm talking about. Of the original albums, Act 2 is more than likely the one where most people wind up getting introduced to the Protomen. I imagine that a lot of newer fans of the band probably heard songs like The Hounds and Light Up the Night before even realizing that they were part of a rock opera with an overarching plot. A lot of the songs are just really good and easy to listen to, even if you're not following the details of the story. However, at the same time, this is probably the most theatrical album out of all three. It's got a much more dense plot and needs to establish a lot more, so there's a lot more musical theater sing-talking than there is in the previous album or even the one that comes after it. This isn't criticism though. I really enjoy the back and forth between various characters in a lot of these songs.
What are you doing here?
Let me take you away.
I'm not going anywhere.
It will be nothing when this
He will
one's
be
scored.
everything that a man is supposed to be.
This album is a prequel to the previous one, following a much younger Thomas Light as he and Albert Wiley are working to create machines to assist humanity and cultivate the Earth as a way to avenge the death of Thomas's father, who lost his life in that line of work, as well as to assist his wife Emily, who endures the physical labor of her own work. The difference in ambitions between the two men are on display, with Wiley hoping that the accomplishments grant him the kind of wealth and status that he feels is deserved, and views mankind as weak, both physically and in willpower in the face of their new inventions. Thomas is conflicted about what the release of these robots will do to fundamentally change the world at large, and is concerned about how dangerous the new tools are, but ultimately he activates them and they're put to work. Still doubtful and scared of his own creations, Thomas begins to feel guilt for the inevitable uprooting of society, and bringing about a new age of fear. While he begins to panic and look for a way to reverse course, Wiley encounters Emily at Thomas's apartment, and after she resists his advances, he has one of the robots slit her throat. Thomas is then framed for the death of his wife and is now suddenly pursued by authorities as Wiley pushes the narrative onto the public, who now admire him for the technological accomplishments he now takes full credit for. After being put on trial, it's determined that by law, Light is innocent, yet that doesn't quell the guilt that he feels himself, nor the now collective court of public opinion that has rallied against him. As the mobs attempt to ensnare the doctor, he flees town, and as time passes, the city begins to change. Wiley takes charge over the city as technological and societal progress snowballs, turning it into the futuristic dystopian world that we had seen in the first album. We then follow a new character named Joe, who feels a certain urge to speak out about how the world seems rigged against the average everyday person, and wants to change things but doesn't know how. In doing so, he also escapes the city, but realizes that he's being followed by a robotic sentry that is meant to silence him. He fights the robot and beats it, and he encounters the now much older Thomas Light, who shares in his vision of a better world. The two conspire together to try and bring Wiley back down in an act of terrorism that involves setting off an explosion in the high tower that looks down on the city, in an attempt to shut down the machine so Light can take down Wiley himself. However, Joe gets caught in the blast with their plans of saving the world rendered useless, providing Wiley with the excuse necessary to justify complete control over the city. Thomas is now even more racked with grief and guilt than before, and is given evidence that Wiley's new world order is even more immutable and monolithic than previously imagined. Yet in his despair, he finds a letter written to him from Emily that encourages him to keep fighting for the people, and that they need him, to which he finds his resolve and gets back to work, walking back into the fires of the hell he helped create. If you didn't believe me before, I did mean what I said when I mentioned that this album's plot is more dense. There's a lot more moving pieces to it, and admittedly it can be pretty hard to understand if you're only listening to the music itself. Each original album that the Protomen have produced comes with a libretto within the CD/vinyl that lines out the story of the album that isn't explicitly stated in the lyrics. In Act 1, you can kind of get away without reading it since it's pretty sparse and most of the plot is lined out in the lyrics. But in Act 2, it's a lot harder to piece together by yourself. But even without it, the music is just really good, you guys.
You gotta feel it, girl. Feel the wind pick up.
The main takeaway of this album, I feel, is that everyone has a part to play in the downfall of a free world. Like, yeah, obviously, Wiley and Light are clear contributors, but the other main thing to note is the role the collective masses play as well. Something mentioned a lot in the libretto is how in this world there are 1984-like telescreens all throughout the city that Wiley begins to make use of to manipulate and control the public. Technology aside, the point is to show how easily he was able to sway the general population by providing convenience and promising security, namely in the form of going above the law and targeting and eliminating people that he determines to be a threat. The proles of this world share the blame in their lack of resistance to this systemic takeover, creating a world that eventually turns into one where any opposing voices are snuffed out. Act 2 has been my personal favorite album for quite a long time now, and who knows, even after Act 3 has been fully released and has even given plenty of time to sit with me, it still might be. One thing I really like about Act 2 is how it's as varied as it is, yet doesn't feel like it's just diverse for the sake of being so. The different genres of music covered in the album have a purpose in conveying the context of an individual scene or in representing a particular character. It all just feels like every creative decision is meant to service the story above all else. Like, I love how the album starts with a more acoustic and orchestral sound, but then transitions to the synthesizer aesthetic to convey the shift in the environment. You can feel the change in the world through the music itself, and not just through characters telling you that it's different now. How the World Fell Under Darkness is basically that entire idea wrapped up in a single song. The Hounds is an intense swing rock piece that represents the intensity of being on the run from the authorities in their witch hunt, and is a song dedicated to exploring Wiley's character as a whole. And all of the more Western motifs that are used to add to the older atmosphere to all of Light's songs are done really well at sounding soulful and authentic, which still existed in Act 1 with Unrest in the House of Light, but is now an idea that's greatly expanded upon, much like Light's character as a whole. To a lot of people, this album turned Light into the main character for the entire trilogy. This album also has a lot more musical slow points and swells that make it feel like it's a plot that's really moving. It's not as much of a blitz as the first album is, but that doesn't stop there from being a lot of that same emotion that rings through so many of its songs. It's just presented with a different tone.
Will our souls remember where we said we meet? On the way out of this town, I'm leaving one way or the other, Emily. There's nothing left here for me now.
It's just the best, and like I said before, it feels both totally different from the last one, but is also simultaneously a natural evolution for the band and their talents, both musically and in how they go about crafting their narrative. What's great too is, like I said before, Act 1 is still really good, so it doesn't feel like there's this massive gap in talent and production between the two. There are certainly less hands involved in making the first album, but aesthetically it just feels convincingly more scrappy, which helps it age even better, both in how it sounds and in how the album goes about telling its story, given the dire straits the characters find themselves in during Act 1. The long-winded point I'm trying to make here is that it feels like you could listen to Acts 1 and 2 both in release order or chronologically without it ever feeling like a step down, which is not something you could say about most prequels in any medium ever.
This city made us. This city gave us.
Act 3 feels like one of those projects that couldn't actually exist. Like a concept that would have been really cool to see, but since we don't live in a perfect world, it only lives in our imaginations, forever wondering what it only could have been like. For a long time, that's what Act 3 was, a forever project that everyone could only speculate on, holding on to the hope that one day we'd see it come to fruition. Between Act 1 releasing in 2005 and Act 2 in 2009, it took 16 years for Act 3 to finally release in 2025. It feels like a feat of logistics that shouldn't be possible. As a man who is now officially in his late 20s, I'm starting to see how hard it can be to get even a bunch of dorks with nothing going on to all regularly meet up on a consistent basis, much less a band of people with members likely in their 40s with children of their own, who almost certainly don't have this be solely what they do for a living to all come together and work on a project like this. It takes a certain level of passion and dedication to make something like this even happen, and you can feel every ounce of that in the final product. There were some glimpses over the years of what Act 3 would generally be about as a direct sequel following the events of Act 1, with the only vague description being that, quote, things would not end well for humanity. A few songs had also been released over the years, namely Hold Back the Night and what would later be the titular song This City Made Us, both of which were released on an EP 10 years ago now, as well as The Fight, released now 3 years ago as a single. It wasn't until late 2025 that there was any solid news on the whereabouts of the album. But then... On one fateful Friday, they fully announced the album and listed it for pre-order on Bandcamp. Additionally, with the pre-order, they stated that they would release 1 to 2 songs each week. It was a fascinating idea that I'd never heard of before, putting the album on a sort of episodic release schedule. Given how the band and their albums normally operate, it made a lot of sense as opposed to an ordinary music album doing the same thing. And having it be released this way made it to where there was ample time for each individual track to be given a lot of room to breathe and settle, allowing you to speculate on what was going on in the story and dissect its meaning, before getting ready for the exciting new episode of Act 3. A lot of this was also helped greatly by the fantastic artwork put out for each release, done by John DeLuca and Version Industries, which helped to convey a general idea of what's going on in each song and also just provide some breathtaking visuals. Something I find to be very neat when comparing Act 3 to the other previous albums is how even though there aren't a whole lot of brand new characters and story material, it also doesn't feel like it's pulling as much from outside sources. As I mentioned before, Act 2 took a lot of inspiration from 1984 and the non-fictional story of Robert Oppenheimer. And Act 1 is probably the most directly tied to actual Mega Man lore, though it diverges in a pretty major way. Act 3, however, seems to be a lot more self-referential, pulling mostly from the Protomen's previous albums, and it honestly feels earned. The way that a lot of these characters and the setting have been built makes it feel like it can stand on its own 2 feet to tell its story and feel incredibly impactful. The album itself is probably the least narratively dense out of the trilogy when it comes to its plot, but that's mainly due to the fact that this album seems to be a lot more introspective. There's less action and a lot more instances of characters being more self-reflective, both on their own circumstances and the general state of the world.
I know it's all gonna end, but I swear I don't know how.
The new main character, referred to as the girl in the liner notes, is essentially another hopeful freedom fighter, who has become a makeshift leader of the small rebel movement within the city, standing against the oppressors and going around and trying to locate the legends of this world and convince them that it's still worth saving. Finding Light and then Mega Man, both who have a song with each of them sharing their perspectives on the world with the girl, followed by a song where they basically have a soliloquy about who they feel they should be and what they ought to do. Interspliced with Buried in the Red, a song dedicated to Wily, reaffirming his position on how humanity is weak and needs his guidance to survive without crashing and burning, all while ironically launching his own assault on the citizens themselves in an attempt to stamp out rebellion. I really like a lot of these songs, not just because they're all really good, but because it's interesting to get the perspectives of our characters after having gone through all that's been laid out before. It appropriately feels like the beginning to the third act in a movie, where our main characters are at their lowest point, beaten and down but not yet out, finding their way back to finish their battle. the surface, there are a lot more instrumental tracks in this album, but in reality it's mainly just the transitions between songs. Same as before, but now existing as separate tracks from the lyrical portion of the next song, which is a nice touch. The songs across the whole album feel less varied than in Act 2 when it comes to different genres, but they all really suit the tone of the story and setting of this album. No Way Back may very well be my favorite in the whole act, with Hold On being very closely behind it. Both of them, but especially Hold On, have a very Western feel to them, which is a trait of this band that I've brought up a few times now, but I feel like it's worth noting how those elements are very much a part of this whole story's DNA. And I don't just mean musically. A lot of my favorite art pieces from this album are the ones that show us what Mega Man looks like, who in this case has a very cobbled together look to his whole attire. It's very cowboy-like. And aside from it being an American perspective of a Japanese video game character made by people likely influenced by their environment in Tennessee, a landmark of Western American culture, it's also very appropriate for this whole series, which is constantly about overly romanticized heroes of justice riding into the city to save and oppress people, and finding out that this town is, in fact, not big enough for the two of us, and going on to deconstruct that concept of heroes, as well as other Western values.
There are choices I've made that I can't escape. I know you made up your mind, you decided to stay. But I could have ended the fight. Oh, I could have made everything right, but I just walked away.
Hold Back the Night and This City Made Us are also great songs that I feel like can fall to the wayside in discussions of this album, since they've been around for so long and without much of a clear idea as to what could be going on with them plot-wise. So it can be hard to suddenly connect them to a clear story since they've been viewed outside of one for a literal decade. They kind of feel like this album's replacement for the musical theater sing-talking that existed in Act 2. Whereas in Act 1 a lot more of the details of the story were lined out in narration, and Act 2 had its more theatrical approach. In Act 3 a lot more of the songs are about how the characters feel, and they're lined out in conversational songs like this, or are just limited in dialogue to the liner notes exclusively. Which is where a lot of the actual plot details of what's going on in the story tend to be relegated to. Back to the story. While both the girl and Mega Man race back to the city on their own and for their own reasons, the people are under siege from Wily's robots, initially being trampled by his monolithic troops, but strike back and claim a small but symbolically significant victory against the machines. Light, still frantically working on his own devices, drifts into a dream where he sees Emily once again, before waking up and walking out into action, making his way right to the heart of Wily's fortress, evading and deactivating the enemy robots, fighting against them himself, all to the tune of the greatest song ever made.
The city's on fire, and you can't put it out, 'cause boys catch on, and the girls, they know this wasn't the way the night was supposed to go. There's one way out, but I can see they're betting it all on one machine, with a still beating heart, from a dream they can barely recall before it all fell apart.
Part of what's so impactful about Light's Last Stand is that, as always, it comes down to the characters. This is a man who has been racked with guilt over every decision and creation that he's made, believing that the world has fallen due to his involvement, and has felt ready to die as he feels that he has nothing left in his world or to offer it. His machines have oppressed the world, his partner has subjugated its people, his credit for his accomplishments have been stolen and his name tarnished. His love has been murdered, his firstborn killed, and his second son turned his back on humanity, and every attempt to try and take back the world has been met with complete and utter failure. But after all of that, he finds the will to stand up and be the shining example for the rest of the city. It feels truly cathartic to see Light be the man that you always know and believe that he could be, finally casting his guilt and self-doubt aside. He stands and fights, not as a hero or a martyr or a criminal. He stands as a man, being everything that a man is supposed to be. A lot of people have called Light's Last Stand the greatest song made by the Protomen, and I kind of have a hard time disagreeing with that. It's very Meatloaf. While I do secretly wish that the liner notes for it were a bit more exciting to match its powerful tone, and while there may be songs I personally like more even on this album, this one does truly feel like the pinnacle of what this story has come down to. And it should be. Light confronts Wily, coming face to face with him at the top of his tower, with a knife in hand ready to strike down the greatest evil in his life. And while surrounded with the opportunity to strike, he puts down the knife, taking pity on his former partner. Instead of taking vengeance on the man that has robbed him of everything of value in his life, he urges him to let go of the world he has been suffocating for decades, leaving a music box from Emily on his desk. He's not here to kill Wily. He just wants to put an end to the slaughter. Wily predictably rejects his outstretched hand, and has him beaten and restrained, and the final track of this album is Light being walked to the gallows, looking out into the crowd and seeing his son racing back to try and save him. Then it happens. When I first heard this song, I was hit with the same level of shock that everyone else was. To add some more context, at the end of this whole weekly release schedule, for the final song they had put together a live watch-along party. It's basically just a stream on Bandcamp that played the album from start to finish, with this being the first time that the final song was released. Before this point, everyone, myself included, had fully expected The Fight to be the final song on the album, with it being released a full 3 years ahead of the album proper as a single, with every implication that it was going to be a part of it. And then, bam! Lights out. It hit everyone really hard, with a lot of people being legitimately angry and with plenty of others in denial of its inclusion. For me, after reeling from the blast, I collected myself and came to the conclusion that this simply wasn't the end of this story, and I was far from the only one. Very quickly, discussion, speculation, and borderline conspiracy theories started to circulate among forums in the fan community.
What did you ask, my dear?
Why was the fight left out of Act 3?
Oh,
It's left out?
With the question.
Oh, God.
What are we talking about?
Did you take it out?
I missed the
Ellen,
question.
Put it back
What was that?
in. You threw nothing.
Hold on, what was the question again?
Why was there? What?
Hold on, wait, what was the question?
The fight left out of Act 3. Why?
What are you talking about?
Right.
What's the fight?
Well, you know, that 15 song track list with one that was released early on, believe it was called The Fight.
I don't know. I don't recall.
Are you sure it's not on there though? Like
Have you
Lawn candy. Lawn candy.
Lawn
Yeah.
candy? Lawn.
In the great outdoors. Oh, that is very good. Got it. Nailed it. Oh, that stuff. Doesn't look I'm glad they put like this in the husband.
He hasn't been around for a while, but Mo Rocca.
Oh, that's good too. That's good. That is good.
I miss Mo Rocca.
Sorry, what was the question?
There were varied reactions all over the place, with a lot of people piling on evidence as to how there just had to be more, ranging from minor comments from band members, the fine print and news updates, looking back at live shows and remarking unreleased musical transitions, and even doing fucking math to try and determine how long the CD/vinyl really was. For me, no matter what hard evidence was put on the table, I could just feel that this wasn't the ending, but it definitely was a part of the story that they would not be undoing. I'm not the longest time fan in the world, but after listening to, following, and analyzing their music for as long as I have now, I feel like I can tell where their mind is at. At least, a little bit. To me, all of the proof I needed was in the lyrics of the music they'd made and released up to this point. You don't make a song that sounds like this, with lyrics like this, and then have it all end like this. And while obviously I don't know the band members on a personal level, I feel like I at least know them well enough to say that they wouldn't pull the rug on their fans like that without a clear purpose. Put simply, they're not assholes, but they are a group of lovable dorks that playfully dodge questions with less than zero subtlety.
I'm sorry, what was the question?
And I think even more importantly, I wouldn't expect that these guys would want their 23-year-old passion project to end like that. These guys played a perfect game of generating excitement, interest, and intrigue throughout its entire release, and I feel like this quote-unquote ending is just another piece of that puzzle. And I think something that really helped me in trying to make sense of all of this was that I started writing this video. By the time the last track dropped, I had already written my synopses of Act 1 and 2, and had covered most of what had been released about 3, though obviously with some revisions later once the liner notes came out. I had actually gone as far as even predicting how things were going to end, hastily writing an assumption on how Light's Last Stand was going to transition into the fight. And I was very, very wrong. The reason I mention this here is that I was already starting to think very critically about the theming and messaging about each album up to this point. Like I had mentioned earlier, the point in all of these albums is to point at the inaction of the people in the city and how it's truly the obstacle to be overcome. And while Act 3 on the surface has a similarly bleak ending to the previous two, I could tell that Act 3 wasn't just an album that was about pointing out once again what we already know. The most important part of Act 3 is how hard it's supposed to hit you. The album looks into the camera and points a finger in your face and makes it clear that you are a part of that apathetic collective that needs to be shocked into action. It's not about simply saying that the people won't do anything, it's about trying to change that. Light's death is supposed to make you frustrated. It's meant to light the fuse that starts a fire in the hearts of people that are ready for revolution and to take back their freedoms. Not by looking at heroes and expecting them to save us, but by our own hands. It's essentially a test. It's the rock opera equivalent of you stole fizzy lifting drinks.
So you get nothing! You lose! Good day, sir!
To see if the people will accept their doomed fate or if they will finally stand up to do something about it. Now, as much as I would love to claim to be the cool guy that's super smart and that everything that happened after the final track came out went exactly as I expected, that's definitely not the case. But before going down that rabbit hole, I first want to go back to talk about the album itself a bit more. I do definitely hope that all of this talk about what will or is expected to come next won't detract from the conversation around the album we did get, because there is still a lot of meat there, even if there are some things currently unresolved in its story. I've seen a lot of people say that they don't feel like Act 3 is as much of a sequel to Act 1 as it is to 2, and I disagree. While the references to Act 2 are a lot more plainly overt, with songs like Buried in the Red, The Dream, and The Good Doctor Part 2 being direct callbacks, the influence that Act 1 has over the album is a lot more subtle and is simultaneously prevailing over a lot more of the album overall. And each of those aforementioned songs are about the continuation of the story of the characters in Act 2, so it makes sense that they appear as they do. Like, first and foremost, considering the general concept and tone of the album, both musically and narratively, it fits in a lot more with the greater emphasis on synthy rock songs that were only partially present in Act 2. The obvious reason for this is when the story is taking place, which is after the city has been enveloped in its high-tech darkness, which is in line with the narrative and tone in Act 1. though it doesn't have quite the more analog grit that Act 1 does, both because Act 3 isn't really about the straight action the way that Act 1 is, and of course due to the more high budget and studio sound that the band has developed over time. More importantly, what I find to be interesting is how the first half of Act 3 is really about all of the different characters reflecting on both the current state of the world, but also on the events of the previous album chronologically. Light's initial dismissal of the girl's optimism is based on the events regarding his sons, and No Way Back is in part about how he can't remain as someone who's not directly involved anymore, as he was in the previous album. This City Made Us is Mega Man's current outlook on the world in contrast to the girl, until Hold On, where he reflects on his father and grips with the kind of person he feels he ought to be and how he relates to him in that same way, as someone who needs to take action and can't just walk away anymore. It's just fascinating for me to get a glimpse at what they feel following the events of Act 1, an album that's over 20 years old, by the way. But again, obviously it's a direct sequel, so maybe people don't give it brownie points for being a logical next step. But there are also a few other good musical callbacks to Act 1 as well, like how a show of force turns into a funeral for her son, and how the choir in Light's Last Stand echo the lyrics from Will of One.
Someone has written on this stone.
And of course, the fate of Thomas Light shares the same mournful chord progressions as Sons of Fate from Act 1, where Protomen speaks his last words. I guess maybe what some people feel is that there aren't enough direct mentions to Protoman himself, which I can understand, I suppose. I mean, he is the name of this band, but even still, there are some nods I believe that are meant to be about Proto, but usually about others at the same time, like Joe and Mega Man. Like in Light's Last Stand when he compares himself to the previous heroes. Same goes for The Good Doctor Part 2 when he talks about the voices in his head that he's lost.
Every move that we made, someone else paid the cost. It can't go on.
It's kind of like Joe, how in the album no one is directly referencing him and his actions because they happened a long time ago. Mega Man is really the most recent instance of the same pattern where a hero fell. And he himself is basically in the same role as Proto at the beginning of the album, having abandoned humanity and has essentially adopted his entire outlook on the world, though not so far as to have turned his weapons against them. I suppose the main thing for me is that so much of this album is about reconstructing the ideas poked at by the rather bleak nature of Act 1. The belief that hope rides alone since the people are incapable of standing for themselves, making collective action useless. We are the dead. Light grieving in solitude and dissuading Mega Man from fighting for apathetic people, and Mega Man's vengeful anger that spurs him into battle. All of these are flawed perspectives coming from flawed people that have all been damaged by the world around them. And Act 3 is trying to buck the trend by resolving these in a way that inspires genuine change in the way that the characters and events of Act 1 just couldn't have within the confines of its world. The first album just feels very angry, like it was written by angry people about angry circumstances. Whereas the third album, it just kind of feels like everyone has grown up a little bit more, trying to restore that hope and optimism in the world and trying to bring back hope where it's absolutely needed. Not by pretending that everything is just going to get fixed automatically, that magically everything is just going to be restored to balance, but by trying to pinpoint exactly what the cause is of problems that got us here and trying to actually fix them. In Act 3, Light stands for himself and becomes a shining example of what a man can be. Mega Man is running back to the city, not to incite violence in the name of a dead man, but to save someone that he knows is alive and cares for, to be a hero. And the people witness Light's actions and see what they're capable of. They drop the fearful dependency on machines and fight to take back their city themselves. To me, this is what makes it a fitting sequel to Act 1 while also being its own thing. Next, I wanted to talk about Dr. Light himself, considering he's the only character so far whose story we have a conclusive ending to. A lot of context has been added thanks to the liner notes of the album, and at the start, he's attempting to dissuade the rebels from staging a full-on assault against Wily and his forces. Yet we simultaneously see that while he isn't overtly helping them, he is still continuing to work against Wily, with the notes hinting at and repeatedly infiltrating and potentially sabotaging Wily's secret projects, while also developing devices that momentarily deactivate his robots. It's an interesting position for him to be in, since it feels like he's lost faith in the idea of direct opposition to the establishment, but has become more secretive about his plans to try and weaken them, Considering that every plan of his to make a big and loud takedown has ended in complete disaster, I can see this being Light's way to try and reduce bloodshed as much as possible. That, and I can imagine Light's perspective as one who likely doesn't believe in the people to stand and fight for themselves anymore, since all of the noise and talk in the world means nothing when they cower in the face of real revolution, as shown in Act 1. Of course, this all comes to a head when the rebel movement becomes too strong for Wily to ignore, and he rains fire upon its members and they fully fight back, leading to Light charging towards his headquarters and facing him directly. While some people may be a bit confused as to why Light didn't just kill him, to anyone who has been following his entire story, I feel like it shouldn't be a surprise that he doesn't. I don't really think that Light has it in him to kill a man and take revenge, no matter how dire the circumstances, because that just isn't who Light is as a person. In every scenario, no matter how grim the circumstances, he's never been the type to lash out in violence. His first and last reaction is always to keep working. When Emily died, he fled the city but devised a plan to try and dismantle Wily's New World Order. When Joe died, he got back to work and built a machine to destroy Wily's robots. When Protoman died, he built a new sun in his grief. And when Mega Man turned his back on humanity, he still kept working. This time in ways that prevented there from being single individuals acting as the leaders of revolution. It's just how he is. And in every one of those circumstances, he always developed a deep connection for the ones he would send off into battle. And in this case, even still, no matter the outcome, Light knew that he accomplished everything he needed to. While it might seem like Light is making some grand gesture to Wily to try and convince him to stop everything, I think that's looking at his actions a little too much from a surface level. But even if his actions weren't solely meant to knowingly become the martyr that would fuel the spark that light the fire in the city, or to plant some kind of device in Wily's fortress, I could also totally buy that his compassion and care for others would get the better of him. It's very in character for him to do. As Proto and Mega Man said 8 years ago in this story, his love was both his only weakness, yet also his greatest strength. While there are definitely some theories as to how things are going to go in this album's inevitable follow-up, like further reveals on the girl's character, Mega Man's reactions to these events, and the teased final boss, I'll spare you on any predictions I may have. They'd probably be wrong anyway. However, while I don't have much to say about the follow-up story content, I will say that it has been a very interesting ride since this album's release.
11, 23, 34, 10, 24, 3, 6, 14.
I was one of the many people that have fully expected there to be a few more tracks that would be on the end of the album that would be played at MagFest 2026. And while that didn't exactly happen, it was a very pivotal release day that I think got a lot more people on board with the notion that there was always going to be more. With the formal release of the album physically came the liner notes / libretto booklet that came with it. And while the actual story content leaves a lot unresolved, as I mentioned, the other thing it did was give the audience a coded message within it. The first page features a previously unreleased art piece depicting a member of the rebellion deciphering a message, which simultaneously grants us as audience members a key to that same code system. And as you read through the libretto, you start to notice all of the page numbers aren't linear and skip around. If you jot them all together and decipher it all, it reads, "This isn't the way it ends." And to top it all off, at the end of the show where they played Act 3 live for the first time, they played a new song called Light's Eulogy, followed up with a cover of Queen's The Show Must Go On. Folks, much to my dismay, I wasn't there at the MagFest performance. Getting the album into my hands a week or so later and solving it myself, or refraining from engaging in all that online discussion the whole time, was so fun and exciting. It really makes you feel like you're a part of something greater. This band loves its fans, and it really cares about the fact that you care as an audience member. With the recent announcement of their formal album debut in Nashville, speculation about potential announcements is sure to ignite again. While I can't say for sure what all that may happen, I can tell you for certain that I'll be seeing you in June.
Being Kentucky's first openly transgender elected official, Curtis is hoping this result will set an example for others in the same boat.
If I could say anything to my younger self, it would be the same thing that I would say to any trans kid who's watching this now, which is that you can succeed because of who you are, not for what discriminatory politicians tell you you have to be. And you've got a future. This city, it belongs to you too.
While there is some debate on who the main character of this overarching story is, by the end it feels true to the other two albums that the main character is the city itself. It always has been about the people at large, now reiterating the idea that, as always, a hero is just a man that knows he's free. Every single person is capable of standing up for what they believe in. Don't believe the lies that tell you that you can't or that you aren't able to make a change in the world around you. I'm getting to the point in my life where I see a lot of the major events happening in the world, and I'm seeing particular individuals take actions that are the same age that I am. It's becoming clear to me, as it should be to others, that no grand savior or hero is coming to save us and make the world a better place. The only people that promise that they can are lying to you, and are hoping to use your hope and faith as weapons. If you spend your entire life waiting for someone to come and make the world better, you will live and die waiting. It may be difficult to feel as though you can change the world, but it's because the most powerful change occurs when people unite over what they realize they have in common and stand together. While it's a lot of fun to be talking about how much of an effect this fictional story has on me and the people who listen to it, in reality there have now been numerous Thomas Lights, whose tragic death should be a call to action for the people of our cities. More than anything, these albums, like most pieces of dystopian science fiction, are a warning, and in this case, of what will happen when the people do nothing to stop power-hungry people from taking over their world. As much as you may have a desire to turn your back on the world or the people that are in it, don't forget that you're a part of it too. And no matter how unimportant you think you are, you play a role in making it better or worse. It's all up to you.